Okay. I thought I just turned 30 on my Ranger on Sandstrom in 2025. This was 2 days ago. I'm 31 now. So these damage formulas are as of 1/20/2025. Um, yeah, I'm loving being on Sandstorm again. It's amazing. If you haven't checked it out, it's like up to level 49 now. It has most everything in it except for epics. It does have some flaws, but it's enough is there where it feels pretty awesome. Uh, but yeah, I wanted to just go over a couple different builds that I tested out. I hit 30 and had some CMs and figured I'd actually figure out what's min-max. We all are kind of, a lot of people are experts at this game at this point. I thought I used to be. So I had my own build from live. So I kind of tested that to see if it was really min-max against a couple other options and found out it wasn't quite. But yeah, let's show you what I got here. Um, I took base level 17 gear, basically, the level 17 quest plus a couple extras. Gets me to 179 without self buffs, without putting any training points in, anything. Started swinging. 12 hits gave me a 200 average, which is amazing, right? That's per swing, 200. So I'm doing 400 damage per, double swing with basically nothing, just wearing kind of stock gear, nothing invested at all. Threw on a few points and did kind of my build, gets me up to 350. That got me up to, 250-ish. Going past that to the max you can possibly get at this level with unlocking everything. This is quite expensive this is like 100 plus CMs just to unlock all that stuff. Gets you up to 300. So we're going from 400 to 600, adding like 250 decks. And I'll break it down in a minute, cleanly. I also tried the base 179 decks and just threw everything into strength, and I think I got over 300. And it got me to 209 average per swing, which is, this is a small sample size, so I think that's probably in the margin of error. So effectively, strength does nothing for your hits. And I know Sandstrom, these are formulas were never really well known, so Sandstrom's still kind of like tweaking them and figuring them out, but this strength having no impact does affect the balance. I'll show you in a minute. And one of the cool things about this game, it always was the balance was done fairly good, where, it wasn't, you could min-max, but, you get a long way by doing the wrong things and like just kind of making weird choices and, hey, I want to try this build, and it kind of works. So yeah, it hurts the balance a little bit, but it's still not the worst thing. Let's see. Let me look at the ability options before we start going into this. The only ways to do damage as a ranger, we're going to assume you keep your proc spell up all the time. This is solely for a proc ranger, full proc monster, not, a mixed path, so you get the free pot and like lower procs or any of that mess, or any of the like just pure bow mess, right? This is just proc monster calculations. So you can use the strength-based abilities. Some of them are a little better than others. You can see like this is like a 1-to-1, 1 damage per POW, plus the 40% strength mod, or 2-to-1. A lot of these are kind of in the 2-to-1 range, plus the 40% strength mod. They're not as efficient as the arrows, but the arrows you have to do the painful, swap to the bow right in between hits, drop your abilities, swap back before the next normal hits start. Otherwise, you're going to miss a beat. The only other ways to do damage, one, if you're tanking Thistlecoat, this is efficient and awesome. One of the better damage shields in game. So I do keep that up tanking. But the other one is Thorny Wild, which is the most inefficient damage spell I've ever seen. It's like, it's fun to use because you don't have to swap over to the bow to do like a range 30 pull if you're tanking, but it's like 100 plus POW to do like 30 or 40 damage, and then it slows them as well, so they kind of half pace it to you when you're pulling them. So it's fun, it is, but it's not worth especially it's 30 CMs for just the first round of this. They're expensive and highly inefficient. Anyway, so all the strength ones are a 40% modifier. So if we go with 100 strength, it's not going to affect your quads at all, but it is going to add 40 damage, assuming you're using the strength abilities. And if you're using kick, it makes this really easy to figure out, because kick is 6 recast, which is a pot tick, 30 power cost. So this is basically 30 pot to do an extra 40 damage a round for every 100 strength. You're going to have 40 pot roughly baseline with a reasonable amount of dex. So keeping up your buffs plus doing a kick is going to be your entire thing to do this build, right? But doing that will give you 40 damage a round. I'll go into that in a minute. So 100 dex gives you 40 damage a swing, or 80 damage a round. And then once you get into quadding, it's not going to quite double because quaddings go a little slower, but you can see how this is going to run away even more from the strength, right? Int is, the worst at the moment before quadding, where it's only an extra 10% chance per 100 int per swing to get that 120 damage proc spell, right? It's a level 30 proc spell. So 100 only gives you 24 extra damage a round. Worst of the bunch, but when you start quadding, it pretty much evens out to the strength. So, a little more on abilities before we start. I did do, you can buy pot CMs and pot gear, really, to get you up to do another path to damage, right? If you always group with an enchanter or a bard, then this is just going to be kind of wasteful. But if you don't, it can help. And you can see here it's, kind of the 2 to 3 range. So 10 pot gives you, 20, 30 extra damage around. I'm going to call it 25 for these calcs. Looking at your self buffs, the only ones that give damage besides, if you're tanking and want to do damage shields, is your dex buff. 35 dex gives you 28 damage around for 3.5 pot. So this is incredibly efficient. If you are not maxed on dex, this is one of the best things you can do. It's more efficient than any of your damage abilities to just bump that dex up 35 points. Windblade is better than that. You get a base 25% chance, I believe, to proc that 120 damage, plus you get whatever your int is, which you're going to have 120 because it buffs your int anyway. So even if you have base int, you're going to have 120 int. So that gives you almost 100 damage around for 72 pot. So it's even more efficient than Stalker's Instinct. But basically, these are your two most efficient damage spells. You're going to keep them up all the time, but it's going to cost you 10 pot to do it. So you get a base pot of 40. 10 of that just goes to self-buffing over and over again every 5 minutes. And then, normal bills gives you 2.5 damage per pot. So let's do the base damage here. I got my 100 and whatever. I'm casting my 35 dex on whatever 180 dex I have with just the normal 17 gear. Base 120 int, base 40 pot. It adds up to 600 damage around, which is respectable. Almost all of that, 2/3 of that is just swings. Another 100 of that is just the proc buff up. And then, 75 of that is a bills. So I think oftentimes, at least in my head, I overestimate how much damage our abilities are doing, when really, just keeping those swings going is everything. But still, that's 600 damage around, and I literally have, 180 training points just sitting there unspent. I could throw them all into stamina, right? And maybe that's applicable if you're fighting much higher level caster mobs and you got a healer on you that can keep up when you have no agility, but not that useful. Anyway, go down to the first obvious answer, right? Dex, right? The typical ranger build, or rogue build, or any melee build. Bumps you up to basically just your swings are doing the base damage without the procs or anything. Your pot's going to be a little higher because your dex is higher, so you're doing 10-ish more damage in abilities per round. plus you're doing, the same 99. But that's still, just those swing damage bumps you up like almost 200 more. So you're going from like 600 to almost 800, which is a 30% bump in damage. This is the optimal. It costs about 120-ish CMs to do this. But this is the min-max build. Unless I'm doing something wrong. This is it. I'll go over the strength build real quick before I get to my default build that I used on live and I'm still using. So this one you still get some, your dex, so your dex modded, so you're going to be using the dex ability, so you're going to be using arrows on this one, and you're going to have a decent amount of pot. Speaking of pot, do yourself a favor, and if you find this ring, get it. It's effectively 1 pot for the 40 POW and 6 pot for the 5 pot here, and that gives you basically, half your buffs for free. Let's see. But yeah, so this, you're going to be using your arrows because you have so much dex. It's going to be the 20% mod on your arrows, and you're going to be able to sling, quite a few of them, right? So you can probably tank with this pretty easily as far as pulling with your arrows, body pulling if you start running low on power, and this will work great, right? Strength, unfortunately, it's kind of the worst of the options between the int dex strength kind of. So here I just assumed you could get 350 strength, which might be difficult to get. You probably can't. But even at that, your base build is 600. All the quads and everything is going to remain the same. The only difference is you're going to get an extra 104 damage out of every kick, which gives you 700 damage, 17% over the base. This still, it's not the worst thing in the world. But again, basically, you have 40 pot naturally. 10 of it's going to your 2 abilities that are your most efficient, and then you're kicking for 30 pot. So all you're doing is body pull or sitting in the group and just keep your buff up, kick. Keep your buffs up every 5 minutes, kick, kick, kick. That's your life. So it's a little boring and it's suboptimal. And then I'm using these extremes here of if you blend it, you're getting in the middle of these damages, right? So, it's pretty much not worth going strength. Back on live, if you're quadding for just say 400 a hit, and then you with max dex and 100 strength, and you added 300 strength, you'd be quadding for a little over 500 a hit, something like that. It wasn't as impactful as dex, I'd say half as much, something like that, but it was noticeable. You immediately noticed when you added 100 strength, and that would definitely up this back to the range of I'm putting training points into damage. So it's kind of a shame the damage formulas are screwing up the balance a little bit of the different ways you can build things. So my favorite build is, I love seeing the casino proc numbers. That's the reason I am a ranger. So I want proc weapons and these procs to be pretty high. Only problem is it's just not that efficient at the moment, and it's still not going to be efficient until I max dex. But I have a good excuse to get this to 100, and it's so I can buy pot CMs, right? It's just fun to see those go. At 100 int, I can get the focus, that unlocks, and if you're a were hunter, the arcane rejuvenation unlocks at level 30. If you're aware, you get, I believe, a 10 pot CM at 35, so it's going to work out the same. And you don't need the int to be 100 for that, I believe. But the 100 int also unlocks the normal, non-quest 4 pot for each focus. So this right here, focus 3, gives me 4 pot, 4 pot, 4 pot. So 12 pot total, and then 10 pot for this. I just added 22 pot just for getting my int to 100. And since I start off at a base of around 40, I just added 50% of my pot over again, right? So this is what I'm working with. And again, I had to do this. You notice when I flash by it here. I did this on the int quest and the stamina quest. I'll cover stamina in a minute. The int quest to get me the cheapest intellect possible. And then the next cheapest is strategist for, 10 points for 15, I think. No, 10 points for 5, so I think this is actually the same. So these are all super cheap, like 1 CM for 2 training points for int. And the 3 of these actually get me to 100 on an elf with nothing else. The intestinal fortitude I just got to unlock the vital bodies, and I threw 15 training points on that because I tank a lot and the hit points help. Anyway, so this takes about 100 CMs to get with all that pot and the int stuff. It gets me lower swings than the dex. The 52 pot gives me extra damage, assuming 2.5 damage per pot. I didn't want to assume higher than that because I think I can run through all my arrows and still have pot for kicks and stuff, so my average is a little lower than what this person gets out of their pot because they're doing mostly arrows. And then I get 10 more damage around-ish from the extra int from just the proc damage. So that gives me up to almost in the neighborhood of the min-max at 27. I'm also sticking with build because I tank a lot, and doing the if I pull, I have these 3 spells with 30-second recast, right? So I'm pulling every 10 seconds. I can send an arrow out to pull a mob, which is about right for fast group. So I can fire these off a lot and not have to worry about running out of POW when I keep my buffs up and all that. Whereas some of these other ones might stress you a bit. You might have to resort to body pulling more often. Yeah. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover. I might post a video soon when I had the Thorny Wild, because it's fun. It's so inefficient, but it's fun. If you have a bard with you and you have these spells, it's really fun to not have to switch to your bow and just kind of like nuke these here and there, even though the damage is nothing. But yeah, that's all I got. And yeah, have a good one. Let me know if I screwed up some calcs or if you got another option that might be worth trying or whatever. Yeah, later. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. I did do testing before with my rogue versus my warrior, right? Which is pretty much the same level as like my ranger versus my warrior, right? And it was pretty close to this in live too. It might have been exactly like this, but the same amount of dex and strength with the same weapons cause the same damage. It didn't matter if you're a warrior or a melee, right? So if I have this like 435 dex on a warrior, I'm going to be doing the same damage. So you're not going to be getting quite as efficient as abilities. You're not going to be getting the proc buffs, but I'm still doing 600 damage as a dex warrior, right? So you can build, and you're still going to have some of this, right? So it's going to probably be, more like almost 700 damage, right? Which is pretty good. And actually right up here with the strength build. So, I mean, I have no problem picking up any kind of semi-damage build tanks and stuff off looking for group. I mean, even the low damage ones, you're doing 2/3 the damage of a fully maxed out damage dealer. So like even like a tanky build, if they got a couple hundred dex, they're doing great, right? That's a full, that's 2/3 of a damage dealer. So if you're sitting there waiting for an hour for someone to come on looking for group, just pick up the tank. And that's another cool thing about this particular game that I like, right? You can build a tank to be manageable as a damage dealer. You can build the damage dealer to be manageable as a tank and all over the place. Maybe I'll show you one of the undead cleric I built a little bit ago that's, not great, but it's fun. But yeah, just I see Shadow Knights kind of looking for group here and there, and they'll just sit there for a while, and like people shouting for like the same level damage dealer at the same time, and it's frustrating. Like just grab the Shadow Knight. Yeah, okay. Take care.